I was passing the mashed potatoes when my sister Courtney stood up at the head of the table, wine glass raised, and announced to our entire family that Mom and Dad were signing the house over to her. Just her. I would get nothing. The dining room erupted in cheers and applause. Aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone congratulating her like she had just won some kind of prize. I sat there, fork halfway to my mouth, feeling like someone had punched me in the chest, but I kept my face calm. I set down my fork, turned to my father, and asked quietly, "Dad, should I tell them, or will you?" His fork clattered against his plate, the sound cutting through the celebration like a gunshot. Courtney's face went white. She screamed, "Tell us what?" The room fell completely silent. Every eye turned to me, then to my father, then back to me. I could feel my heart pounding, but I kept my voice steady. I had known this moment was coming. I had prepared for it. 3 months ago, I began, looking around the table at the faces of people I had known my whole life. Mom and Dad called me in a panic. They were facing foreclosure on this house. The bank was 30 days away from taking it. They had fallen behind on payments because of medical bills from Mom's cancer treatment. They were terrified of losing the home they had lived in for 32 years. My mother's hand went to her mouth. My father stared down at his plate, shame written across his features. They asked me if I could help. I continued. They needed someone to co-sign a reverse mortgage to save the house. Without it, they would lose everything. So I flew home from Seattle, met with the bank, reviewed all the paperwork, and I co-signed. I have been making the monthly payments ever since. $12,000 so far out of my own savings, to keep this roof over their heads. Gasps echoed around the table. My cousin Jenna's mouth hung open. My Uncle Thomas set down his beer. Courtney remained standing, frozen, her face cycling through shock, anger, and something that looked like panic. "Is this true?" my Aunt Patricia asked. Looking at my father, he nodded slowly, not meeting anyone's eyes. "It's true. Angelique saved our home. We would have lost it without her." Courtney's hands clenched into fists. "That doesn't change anything," she said, her voice rising. "Mom and Dad decided to transfer the house to me because I'm the one who has been here. I'm the one who stayed local, who took care of them, who showed up every single day while you were off living your fancy life in Seattle. I'm the responsible daughter. They want me to have it." I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone. My hands were steady, even though inside I was shaking. "That's interesting, Courtney. Because when I co-signed that reverse mortgage, my name went on the title. I'm now a legal co-owner of this house. The bank required it as a condition of the loan. So without my consent, this house cannot be transferred to anyone." I held up my phone, showing the scanned documents to the room. The official title paperwork with my name listed clearly alongside my parents' names. Courtney's husband Derek shot to his feet so fast his chair scraped against the hardwood floor. "That's a lie," he shouted, pointing at me. "You're making this up. You probably faked those documents. You always were manipulative, Angelique. Always had to be the center of attention." Several people started talking at once. My Uncle Thomas was shaking his head. My Aunt Patricia looked confused and upset. My mother was crying silently. My father sat with his head in his hands. "I'm not lying," I said quietly, but my voice carried over the chaos. "The documents are filed with the county. Anyone can verify them. I'm not trying to take anything from anyone. I just want the truth to be known before decisions are made about a house that I helped save." Courtney's face had gone from white to red. She looked at Derek, then at our parents, then back at me. "You had no right," she hissed. "You had no right to insert yourself into this family's business. You left. You chose your career over us. You don't get to swoop in now and play hero." The betrayal cut deeper than I expected. This was my sister. We had shared a bedroom growing up, had braided each other's hair, had stayed up late talking about our dreams, and now she was looking at me like I was her enemy. But I had come too far to back down now. I took a breath and looked around the table. These were the people who had been at every birthday, every graduation, every holiday of my life. They deserved to understand how we had gotten here. "Let me explain how this happened," I said. 4 years ago, I moved to Seattle for my job as a medical device sales representative. It was a huge opportunity, one I had worked toward for years. Courtney stayed here in Richmond, which was her choice, and I respected that. We have different lives, different paths. Courtney snorted. Different paths, that's one way to put abandoning your family. I ignored her and continued. When Mom got diagnosed with breast cancer 18 months ago, I was devastated. I immediately started flying home every 3 weeks. I took every bit of vacation time and sick leave I had. I paid for experimental treatments that insurance wouldn't cover. I sent money for groceries, for bills, for anything they needed. Money, Courtney interrupted, her voice dripping with contempt. You think money fixes everything? You think you can just throw cash at problems and that makes you a good daughter? I never said that, I replied. But I couldn't be here physically every single day because I have a job 3,000 miles away that pays for the help I was able to give. I did everything I could. My Aunt Patricia, who had helped raise both of us after our grandmother died, spoke up. Her voice was gentle but firm. Angelique, honey, I understand you helped financially. But Courtney has a point. She was here. She drove your mama to every chemo appointment. She sat with her in the hospital. She held her hand. Physical presence matters. It matters a lot. The words stung because they came from someone I loved and respected. Several other relatives nodded in agreement. I felt the room shifting, the sympathy moving away from me and toward Courtney. I know presence matters, I said quietly. I'm not saying it doesn't. I'm just trying to explain that I did everything I could from where I was. And when it came down to saving this house, I stepped up. That's all. My mother finally spoke, her voice weak. Angelique did help us. She really did. I don't want anyone thinking she abandoned us. She was there in the ways she could be, but before anyone could respond, my cousin Jenna suddenly pushed back from the table and stood up. Jenna was 22, fresh out of college, and had always looked up to me. She was trembling. I need to say something, Jenna announced. Her voice shook, but she kept going. 2 weeks ago, I came by to drop off some groceries for Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert. I walked into the garage to put away some boxes, and I heard Courtney and Derek talking. They didn't know I was there. Courtney's eyes went wide. Jenna, don't you dare. They were talking about the house. Jenna continued, speaking faster now. They said once they got the title transferred, they were going to sell it immediately. They already looked at vacation rental properties in Myrtle Beach. They figured the house would sell for around $450,000. And they were going to use that money to buy an investment property. Derek said something about how stupid Mom and Dad were for falling for the whole family legacy angle. They laughed about it. The room exploded. My Uncle Thomas jumped up. Several people started shouting. My mother let out a sob. My father's face went purple with rage. That's a lie, Courtney screamed. You're a liar, Jenna. You're making this up because you've always been jealous of me. I'm not lying, Jenna said, tears streaming down her face. I swear on everything, I'm not lying. I heard every word. I was too scared to say anything before, but I can't stay quiet anymore. Aunt Linda and Uncle Robert deserve to know the truth. Derek grabbed his coat from the back of his chair. I'm not sitting here and listening to this garbage. We're leaving. Sit down, my father said. His voice was low and dangerous, a tone I had only heard a handful of times in my entire life. You're not going anywhere until we sort this out. Derek hesitated, looking at the faces around the table. My Uncle Thomas, who was 6'4" and had played football in college, crossed his arms and positioned himself near the doorway. Derek slowly sat back down. Courtney was still standing, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. You're all crazy, she said. You're listening to a 22-year-old kid over me? I've been nothing but devoted to this family. Everything I've done has been for Mom and Dad. Everything. But I could see it in my parents' faces. The doubt. The dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, they had been played, and I knew we were only just beginning to uncover the truth. Derek stood up again, this time more aggressively. This is ridiculous. This is a setup. Angelique orchestrated this whole thing because she's jealous that Courtney got chosen to inherit the house. This is an ambush, and I'm not participating in it. He started for the door, but my Uncle Thomas didn't move. Derek, sit down. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Get out of my way, Derek said, his jaw tight. Courtney burst into tears, loud, dramatic sobs that filled the room. How could you all do this to me? She wailed. I've given up everything for this family. My entire life has revolved around taking care of Mom and Dad while Angelique lived her glamorous life in Seattle with her fancy job and her nice apartment and her freedom. I gave up job opportunities to stay here. I gave up traveling. I gave up so much. And this is how you repay me? By accusing me of things I didn't do. My Aunt Patricia rushed to Courtney's side, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. Sweetie, calm down. Nobody's accusing you of anything yet. We're just trying to understand what's happening. Yes, you are, Courtney shouted. You're all believing Jenna's lies and Angelique's manipulations. I deserve that house. I earned it. My mother's voice cut through the chaos. Quiet but clear. Courtney, stop. Everyone turned to look at her. She was pale, her hands trembling in her lap, but her eyes were clear. I need to say something, Mom continued. And I need everyone to hear it. She looked at me, and I saw guilt written all over her face. Angelique, I owe you an apology. A big one. Mom, you don't have to do this, Courtney said quickly. Yes, I do. Mom straightened in her chair. 3 months ago, when we were facing foreclosure, Courtney told us that we shouldn't ask Angelique for help. She said you had mentioned to her that you didn't want the house anyway, that you thought it was too much responsibility, and you'd rather we sell it and downsize. She said you had your own life and didn't want to be burdened with family obligations. The air left my lungs. I never said any of that. Mom, I never said anything even close to that. I know that now, Mom whispered. But at the time, I believed her. Courtney was so convincing. She said she had talked to you about it, and you had been very clear. So when your father suggested calling you about the reverse mortgage, I almost said no. I thought you wouldn't care, but your father insisted. And thank God he did. Courtney's sobs intensified. I was trying to protect you. I didn't want Angelique to feel obligated. That's not your decision to make, Dad said sharply. You lied to us about what your sister said. You manipulated us into excluding her. My father stood up slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. He looked older than I had ever seen him, the weight of everything pressing down on his shoulders. He walked to the antique sideboard where Mom kept important papers and pulled out a folder. Since we're telling truths tonight, he said, I have something I need to confess, something I've been carrying for 6 months. My mother looked at him in confusion. Robert, what are you talking about? He opened the folder and pulled out documents. 6 months ago, Courtney came to us and said we needed to take out a home equity line of credit for $30,000. She said it was for medical expenses, for treatments that insurance wasn't covering. She walked us through the whole process. We were overwhelmed and we trusted her. So we signed the papers. Dad's hands shook as he held up the loan documents. 2 weeks later, I was driving to the pharmacy and I saw Courtney and Derek at a car dealership. They were getting into a brand new Lexus SUV, one of those big, expensive ones. I asked Courtney about it later, and she said Derek had gotten a promotion at work and they bought it themselves. He looked directly at Courtney. But I got suspicious, so I looked at the loan papers more carefully. Courtney, you're listed as the co-borrower on that home equity line of credit. You've been making minimum payments on it while your mother and I thought that money had gone to medical bills. That $30,000 car is being paid for with money borrowed against our house. The silence that followed was deafening. Courtney's face went from red to purple. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. You gave me permission, she finally screamed. You signed the papers. It's not stealing if you gave me permission. We gave you permission because you told us it was for Mom's medical care. Dad roared back. You lied to us. You committed fraud. Derek grabbed Courtney's arm and tried to pull her toward the door. We're leaving. Now. But my uncles Thomas and Marcus stood up simultaneously, blocking the exit. Thomas shook his head. Nobody's going anywhere until this is finished. Courtney jerked her arm away from Derek and whirled on our parents. You always loved her more, she screamed, pointing at me. Always. Angelique was the smart one, the successful one, the golden child. I was never good enough. No matter what I did, no matter how hard I tried, it was always about Angelique and her accomplishments. So yes, I took what I deserved. I took what should have been mine all along. The raw pain in her voice struck something in me. For a moment, beneath all the lies and manipulation, I could see the little girl who had always felt like she was living in my shadow. But that didn't excuse what she had done. My Aunt Patricia was crying now too. "Courtney, honey, this isn't the way. This isn't who you are. You don't know who I am," Courtney shot back. "None of you do." And in that moment, I realized she was right. I didn't know who my sister had become. The person standing in front of me, full of rage and justification for theft, was a stranger. I stood up slowly, drawing every eye in the room to me. My legs felt like water, but I forced myself to stay steady. I had prepared for this moment for weeks, but nothing could have fully prepared me for the emotional devastation of watching my family shatter in real time. "Everyone sit down," I said, my voice calm but commanding. "Please, I need to say something, and I need you all to listen." There was something in my tone that made people obey. Even Courtney sank back into her chair, though her eyes were wild and darting. "I came to Thanksgiving today knowing this was going to happen," I said. "When Dad called me 3 months ago about the foreclosure, something felt wrong. The numbers didn't add up. Mom's medical bills were substantial, yes, but not enough to push them into foreclosure. They had savings. They had retirement accounts. Something else was going on." I looked around the table. So after I co-signed the reverse mortgage and made the first payment, I did something I'm not particularly proud of, but I felt I had no choice. I hired a forensic accountant to review Mom and Dad's finances. They gave me permission to do this because they were confused too. They didn't understand where all their money had gone. My father nodded slowly. "We gave Angelique access to everything. We needed to understand what happened. The accountant's report is sitting in my car right now," I continued, "along with a lawyer who has been reviewing the findings, and what they found is devastating." Courtney's face had gone white again. Derek was sweating. "Over the past 2 years," I said, speaking slowly and clearly so everyone could hear, "Courtney has systematically drained Mom and Dad's savings through various schemes. She convinced them to co-sign loans that she then used for personal expenses. She took control of their bank accounts under the guise of helping them manage bills, then transferred money to herself in small increments that they didn't notice. And most seriously, she forged Mom's signature on checks totaling $18,000. Gasps echoed around the room. My mother's hand flew to her chest. My Aunt Patricia stood up, her face stricken. "The forensic accountant found 23 separate instances where Mom's signature was forged," I continued. "Courtney had power of attorney for healthcare decisions, which Mom and Dad granted her when Mom got sick so she could make medical decisions if needed. But Courtney used that access to get into financial accounts at the bank by claiming she needed to pay medical bills. The bank gave her access, believing she was acting in Mom's best interest." "That's not true," Courtney screamed, but her voice was shrill and desperate now. "I had permission for everything. They told me I could use the accounts. Did they tell you that you could forge Mom's signature?" I asked quietly. "Did they tell you that you could take $18,000 in checks made out to yourself?" Silence. My Uncle Tomas' face was like stone. "Angelique, are you saying that Courtney committed fraud? Actual criminal fraud?" "Yes," I said. "That's exactly what I'm saying. The documentation is extensive. The forensic accountant traced every transaction. The pattern is clear and undeniable." My Aunt Patricia turned to Courtney, tears streaming down her face. "Courtney, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't do this." Courtney's face crumpled. For a moment, I thought she might confess, might apologize, might show some remorse, but instead rage took over. She shot to her feet, knocking her chair backward. "Fine," she screamed. "Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I took the money. Yes, I forged the checks. Yes, I manipulated them. But I earned it. Do you know what it's been like living in Angelique's shadow my entire life? Do you have any idea?" Her voice broke. She was the valedictorian. She got the full scholarship. She got the fancy job. Everyone was always so proud of Angelique. And what was I? The daughter who stayed home. The one who wasn't smart enough or ambitious enough or special enough. So yes, when I had the chance to take something for myself, I took it. I was just taking what should have been mine all along if our parents had loved us equally. The room was frozen in shocked silence. "Courtney," my mother whispered, her voice broken. "We do love you equally. We always have." "That's a lie," Courtney spat. "It's always been a lie. But you know what? None of it matters now. Because I have something that's going to change everything." She put her hand on her stomach, a gesture so deliberate it could only mean one thing. "I'm 12 weeks pregnant," she announced. "Derek and I are having a baby. So before you all condemn me, before you call the police or whatever Angelique is planning, remember that you're not just punishing me. You're punishing an innocent child. What kind of family denies a baby a secure future? What kind of family sends a pregnant woman to jail?" The emotional manipulation was breathtaking in its audacity, and I watched it work. I watched my Aunt Patricia's face soften. I watched my Uncle Marcus shift uncomfortably. I watched several cousins exchange glances. "Maybe we should think about this," Patricia said quietly. "For the baby's sake. Maybe there's a way to work this out that doesn't involve lawyers and courts." I felt the momentum shifting again. Felt the sympathy moving toward Courtney despite everything she had done. The pregnancy was her trump card, her final play to avoid consequences. But I wasn't done yet. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and I felt a wave of sadness wash over me. This was the girl I had grown up with, the sister I had loved and protected and defended. And she had become this. "Courtney," I said quietly, "I am genuinely happy that you're pregnant. I want to be an aunt. I want your child to have a wonderful life." Her eyes narrowed suspiciously. "But the baby doesn't change what you've done," I continued. "And bringing a child into a foundation built on lies and theft isn't a secure future. It's a house of cards waiting to collapse." I took a deep breath. This next part was going to hurt. It was going to hurt all of us. 2 weeks ago, I contacted the district attorney's office in Richmond. I provided them with the forensic accountant's full report, copies of the forged checks, documentation of the unauthorized transfers, and a detailed timeline of the financial abuse. Elder financial abuse is a felony in Virginia. Given the amount of money involved and the vulnerability of the victims, the DA's office is very interested in pursuing this case. The color drained from Courtney's face. Derek stood up so fast his chair fell over. "The forged checks alone carry a potential sentence of 1 to 20 years in prison," I said, my voice steady even though inside I was shaking. "The DA has already reviewed the evidence. They believe they have a strong case." My mother let out a sob. My father put his head in his hands. Around the table, family members sat in stunned silence. "However," I continued, looking directly at Courtney, "I'm going to give you a choice. And you need to make this decision right now, tonight, with everyone here as witnesses." Courtney's chest was heaving. She looked like a cornered animal. "You can sign a legally binding agreement that my lawyer has prepared. You will repay every single dollar you stole from Mom and Dad over the next 10 years. You will relinquish any and all claims to their house, now and forever. You will attend mandatory counseling, and you will never, ever have unsupervised access to their finances again. There will be oversight. There will be accountability." I paused. "If you agree to these terms and stick to them, I will not press charges. The DA's office has agreed to defer prosecution pending completion of the restitution agreement. But if you refuse, or if you violate the terms in any way, I will pursue this case with everything I have. You will face criminal charges. You will likely go to prison. And your child will be born while you're awaiting trial or serving a sentence." The silence in the room was absolute. "You're bluffing," Courtney whispered, but there was no conviction in her voice. "I'm not," I said. "The lawyer is in my car. The agreement is ready to sign. This is your one chance, Courtney. Take it or leave it." Courtney looked at Derek, her eyes desperate. "Say something. Defend me. Tell them I'm not a criminal." And this is when everything truly fell apart. Derek looked at my sister, looked at the faces around the table, and took a step backward. "I can't do this," he said, his voice hollow. "I've been telling you for months to stop. I told you this would blow up. I told you someone would figure it out eventually." "Derek," Courtney said, her voice rising in panic. "I didn't know about the forged checks," Derek said quickly, addressing the room. "I swear I didn't know about that. I thought the house transfer was legitimate. I thought your parents were giving it to you willingly. The car, yeah, I knew about the car, but I thought your parents had agreed to help us. I didn't know it was fraud." "You liar," Courtney screamed. "You knew. You knew everything." "I can't go to prison," Derek said, his voice cracking. "I have a career. I have a future. I can't go down with you." He grabbed his coat from the back of the fallen chair. "I'm sorry. I'm so sorry to your parents. But I can't be a part of this anymore. I'm done." And just like that, he walked out. He walked out on his pregnant wife in the middle of the biggest crisis of her life, in front of her entire family, and he didn't look back. Courtney stood there, frozen, watching the door close behind him. Then she collapsed into her chair and began to sob. Not the manipulative crying from before, but deep, gut-wrenching sobs that shook her entire body. My Aunt Patricia rushed to her side, but even she looked shaken and uncertain. No one else moved. My father stood up slowly. He walked over to me, his eyes wet with tears, and pulled me into a tight hug. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I'm so sorry we let this happen. I'm sorry we didn't protect you. I'm sorry we were blind." My mother joined us, wrapping her arms around both of us. "We're proud of you," she said, her voice breaking. "We're so proud of your strength." I held on to them, these people who had raised me and loved me despite their flaws, and I let myself cry too, because none of this should have been necessary. Because my sister should have been better. Because families shouldn't have to destroy each other to find the truth. When we finally pulled apart, I looked at Courtney. She was still sitting there, still sobbing, with Patricia's arm around her shoulders. "What's your answer?" I asked quietly. Courtney looked up at me, her face blotchy and swollen, her eyes full of hate and pain and something that might have been surrender. "Ill sign," she whispered. "Ill sign your stupid agreement." And just like that, it was over. 3 days after Thanksgiving, we all gathered in the law office of Margaret Huang, the attorney I had hired to handle the restitution agreement. The office was in a modern building in downtown Richmond, all glass and steel and uncomfortable leather chairs. Courtney sat across the conference table from me, my parents, and attorney Huang. She looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her eyes were hollow, her skin pale, her hands trembling as they rested on the polished wood surface. Patricia had wanted to come as support for Courtney, but Courtney had refused. She arrived alone. Derek hadn't contacted her since walking out on Thanksgiving. He had filed for separation the very next day, and his lawyer had already sent papers requesting a paternity test once the baby was born. Attorney Huang laid out the agreement page by page, explaining each clause in careful detail. Total restitution amount, $67,400. Payment plan. Monthly installments over 10 years at 0 interest. Immediate relinquishment of all claims to the family home, signed and notarized. Mandatory attendance at therapy sessions twice monthly for a minimum of 2 years. Complete transparency of finances with quarterly reporting to an independent mediator. 0 unsupervised access to my parents' accounts ever. The terms were strict but fair. They would give Courtney a path to make things right without destroying her future completely. But they would also ensure she could never do this again. "Do you understand everything that's been explained?" Attorney Huang asked Courtney. Courtney nodded, not looking up. "I need a verbal confirmation," Attorney Huang said gently. "Yes," Courtney whispered. "I understand." As she reached for the pen, she hesitated. Her hand hovered over the document. Then she looked up at me for the first time since we had arrived. "Can I say something?" she asked, her voice barely audible. I nodded. "I'm sorry," she said, and fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. "I know that's not enough. I know it doesn't fix anything, but I need you to know that I'm sorry." She took a shaky breath. "I was jealous. I've been jealous of you since we were kids. Mom and Dad never said they loved you more, but I felt like they did. Everything came so easy to you. School, friends, your career. And I had to work so hard for everything. And it still wasn't as good as what you had. Her voice cracked. I felt invisible. I felt like the only time anyone noticed me was when I was helping someone else, taking care of someone else. So when I had control of Mom and Dad's accounts, when I had access to their money, it felt like finally I was getting something that was just mine, something I didn't have to share with you or compete with you for. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. But that doesn't make it right. I know that. I stole from my own parents. I manipulated them. I lied to everyone. And the worst part is that I justified it to myself. I convinced myself that I deserved it, that it was owed to me somehow. She looked at my parents. Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry. You didn't fail me. You loved me the best way you knew how. I'm the one who failed. I'm the one who let jealousy turn me into someone I don't even recognize. My mother was crying silently. My father's jaw was tight. I don't expect you to forgive me, Courtney continued. I don't even know if I can forgive myself, but I'm going to do better. For my baby, I have to do better. I have to become the kind of person my child can be proud of. She picked up the pen and signed her name on every page that required it. Her signature was shaky but clear. When she finished, she pushed the papers across the table to Attorney Huang. Thank you for giving me this chance instead of letting me go to prison, she said, looking at me. I know I don't deserve it. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell her that I forgave her, that everything would be okay, that we could rebuild our relationship. But the wound was too fresh, the betrayal too deep. I hope you do become that person, I said finally. For your baby's sake, and for yours. We left the office separately. Over the following weeks, the family slowly began to process everything that had happened. Some relatives cut Courtney off completely, refusing to speak to her or acknowledge her existence. Others, like Patricia, maintained limited contact but with firm boundaries. No more loans, no more financial help, no more excuses. Derek followed through with the divorce. He moved to North Carolina for a job opportunity and made it clear he wanted nothing to do with Courtney beyond whatever child support the court would eventually mandate. Courtney moved into a small one-bedroom apartment near the hospital where she would eventually deliver. She got a job working at a retail store in the mall, something she probably would have seen as beneath her before all this happened. But she showed up on time, worked her shifts, and made her first restitution payment exactly when it was due. I watched all of this from a distance, keeping my parents informed but maintaining my own boundaries. I had done what I needed to do to protect them. The rest was up to Courtney. Then, 2 months after Thanksgiving, my mother called me while I was at work in Seattle. I stepped outside into the February cold to take the call. Angelique, I need to tell you something, Mom said. Courtney has been going to therapy regularly. Her counselor says she's making real progress. And yesterday, she came by the house and gave me a letter. It's for you? My heart clenched. What does it say? I didn't read it, Mom said. She sealed it and asked me to mail it to you. But she wanted me to tell you that she's not asking for forgiveness or trying to manipulate you. She just needed to say some things. The letter arrived 4 days later. I stared at it for an hour before I finally opened it. It was 6 pages long, handwritten in Courtney's careful script. She didn't make excuses. She didn't ask me to forgive her or reconcile. She simply took accountability, laid bare her thought processes, and how she had justified her actions to herself, and expressed genuine remorse. She talked about what she was learning in therapy about jealousy and self-worth and family dynamics. She talked about how she wanted to break the cycle. How she wanted her daughter to grow up knowing that your value doesn't come from comparing yourself to others. At the end, she wrote, I know I destroyed your trust in me. I know I destroyed our relationship. I'm not asking you to let me back into your life, but someday, maybe years from now, if you're willing, I would like the chance to meet and talk, not to reconcile necessarily, but to show you that I became someone better. Someone worthy of being your sister again. And if that day never comes, I'll understand. But I'll keep working toward it anyway, because it's the right thing to do. I folded the letter carefully and put it in my desk drawer. I wasn't ready to respond. Maybe I wouldn't be ready for a long time, but I kept it. I kept it because, despite everything, she was still my sister. And some part of me still hoped she could change. 3 weeks later, I got a text from my mother. A photo of Courtney's ultrasound, showing a tiny profile of a baby girl. Underneath, my mother had written, "Her name is going to be Grace. Courtney says it's because she wants to remember that grace is something we all need sometimes." I looked at that photo for a long time. A new life, innocent and perfect, about to be born into a family that was broken but trying to heal. I texted back a simple heart emoji. It wasn't much, but it was something. It was a door left open, even if just a crack. And maybe, someday, that would be enough. 6 months after that terrible Thanksgiving, I stood in the backyard of my parents' home on a warm May morning. The dogwood trees were in full bloom, their white and pink blossoms creating a canopy of beauty overhead. Bees hummed among the flowers. A robin sang from the fence post. Everything felt alive and renewed. My mother's cancer was in remission. The doctors were cautiously optimistic. She had gained back some of the weight she had lost, and there was color in her cheeks again. My father looked younger too, the stress lines around his eyes less pronounced. They were healing, physically and emotionally. I had refinanced the reverse mortgage into a traditional mortgage under my name, negotiating a much better interest rate and lower monthly payments. My parents contributed what they could from Dad's retirement pension, but the bulk of the payment came from me. And I was okay with that. The house was safe. That was what mattered. My parents would live there for the rest of their lives, and after that, the house would be mine. We had it all documented properly this time, with a real estate attorney and a proper will. No more confusion. No more manipulation. Everything was clear and legal and fair. I picked up the garden hose and started watering the tomato plants my mother had put in last month. The water sparkled in the morning sunlight. I thought about everything that had happened, about how close we had come to losing it all. There had been a moment, sitting at that Thanksgiving table with Courtney's announcement ringing in my ears, when I had wanted to just walk away, to let her have the house, let her have the victory, and remove myself from the whole mess. It would have been easier. It would have avoided conflict, but I realized that true love and loyalty don't mean enabling bad behavior. They don't mean sacrificing yourself on the altar of keeping the peace. Sometimes love means standing firm, even when it's painful. Sometimes love means holding people accountable, even when they're family. I thought about Courtney, who had given birth to baby Grace 3 weeks ago. My mother had gone to the hospital, had held her granddaughter, had sent me dozens of photos. Grace was beautiful, tiny and perfect, with a shock of dark hair and my sister's nose. Courtney had kept up with her therapy appointments and had made every single restitution payment on time. She was working 2 jobs now, the retail position and weekend shifts at a coffee shop, scraping together money to provide for Grace. Derek sent child support checks but had made no effort to meet his daughter, his loss. My mother said Courtney was different, quieter, more thoughtful. She didn't talk much about what had happened, but she was trying, really trying. I hadn't seen Courtney yet, hadn't met baby Grace in person. I wasn't ready. The wound was still too fresh, the betrayal still too raw, but I kept the photo of Grace on my refrigerator, and when my mother asked if I wanted updates, I said yes. Maybe someday we would find a way back to each other. Maybe not as the sisters we had been, but as something new. Something built on honesty instead of hidden resentments. On boundaries instead of blind trust. On reality instead of expectations. Or maybe we wouldn't. Maybe the damage was too deep, the fracture too wide to bridge. And I had made peace with that possibility too. My father came out into the backyard, carrying 2 glasses of iced tea. He handed me one and stood beside me, looking out over the yard he had maintained for over 3 decades. "Thank you," he said quietly, "for everything. For saving the house, for standing up when it would have been easier to walk away, for protecting us." I squeezed his hand. "You would have done the same for me. I should have seen it," he said, his voice heavy with regret. "I should have seen what Courtney was doing. I failed you both. I failed you by not noticing she was stealing, and I failed her by not seeing how much pain she was in." You're human, I said. You did the best you could. We all did. He nodded, but I could see he was still carrying the guilt. Maybe he always would. Parents are like that. They carry the weight of their children's choices, even when those choices were beyond their control. We stood there together in comfortable silence, sipping our tea, listening to the sounds of the neighborhood waking up around us. A lawnmower started up next door. A dog barked in the distance. Life continuing, ordinary, and precious. What did you learn from all this? My father asked suddenly. I thought about his question carefully. I learned that family is not defined by blood alone. It's defined by respect, honesty, and mutual care. And when those foundations are broken, it's not selfish to demand accountability. It's necessary. What else? He prompted. I learned that you teach people how to treat you. If you let them walk all over you in the name of keeping the peace, you're not actually keeping the peace. You're just postponing the explosion. Real peace comes from honest communication and healthy boundaries, even when those boundaries hurt. I took another sip of tea. And I learned that sometimes love means saying no. Sometimes love means consequences. Because enabling someone's worst behavior isn't love at all. It's cowardice dressed up as compassion. My father put his arm around my shoulders. You're a lot wiser than I was at your age. I had good teachers, I said, leaning into him. You and Mom taught me right from wrong. You taught me to stand up for what's fair. You taught me that integrity matters. I just had to figure out how to apply those lessons to a situation you never prepared me for. Nobody can prepare you for family betrayal, he said softly. But you handled it with more grace than I ever could have. We went inside together. My mother had made breakfast, French toast, and bacon, the same meal she had made every Sunday morning throughout my childhood. We sat at the kitchen table, just the three of us. And we talked about ordinary things. My job, the neighbors, new puppy, the church potluck coming up next month. We didn't talk about Courtney. We didn't talk about the money or the house or the legal agreements. We just existed together, healing in the quiet spaces between words. Later that afternoon, as I packed my bag to head back to Seattle, my mother pulled me aside. I know you're not ready to see Courtney yet, she said. And I understand, but I want you to know that she asks about you. She wants to know how you're doing. She wants to know if you're okay. Tell her I'm okay, I said. Tell her I'm healing. And tell her I hope she's healing too. My mother hugged me tight. You saved this family, she whispered. You saved all of us. Even Courtney. Though she may not fully understand that yet. I just did what needed to be done, I said. That's what heroes do, Mom replied. On the flight back to Seattle, I thought about everything that had transpired over the past 6 months. The pain, the betrayal, the difficult choices, the consequences, the tiny, fragile steps toward healing. I thought about the life lesson in all of it, the wisdom that had been forged in the fire of family trauma. Family is complicated, love is complicated, and sometimes the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones who hurt you the most. But that doesn't mean you have to accept the hurt. That doesn't mean you have to sacrifice yourself to maintain a facade of harmony. You can love someone and still hold them accountable. You can care about someone and still maintain boundaries. You can hope for someone's redemption while protecting yourself from their toxicity. Real strength is not avoiding conflict. Real strength is facing the truth, even when the truth shatters everything you thought you knew. Real strength is standing firm in your worth and refusing to be diminished, even by people who share your blood. And real peace, lasting peace, doesn't come from pretending everything is fine when it's not. It comes from honest reckoning, from consequences, from the hard work of rebuilding on a foundation of truth instead of comfortable lies. I looked out the airplane window at the clouds below, puffy and white and impossibly beautiful. Somewhere down there, my parents were safe in their home. Somewhere down there, Courtney was learning to be a mother to baby Grace. Somewhere down there, a family was putting itself back together, piece by painful piece. And I was okay. I had stood up for what was right. I had protected the people I loved. I had refused to be a victim. That was enough. As I settled back in my seat, I thought about you, the person listening to this story. Maybe you're facing something similar. Maybe someone in your family has betrayed you, has taken advantage of you, has made you feel like you're the problem for standing up for yourself. I want you to know, you're not the problem. You're not being difficult or dramatic or selfish for demanding respect. You're not wrong for setting boundaries. You're not bad for expecting the people who claim to love you to actually show it through their actions. Family is precious. But family doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean being a doormat. It doesn't mean sacrificing your well-being for people who wouldn't do the same for you. Stand firm. Speak truth. Protect yourself. And trust that the people who truly love you will respect your boundaries, even if it takes them time to understand. You deserve better than crumbs of affection and scraps of respect. You deserve the full measure of love and care that you give to others. And if the people in your life can't or won't provide that, it's okay to love them from a distance while you protect your peace. In the end, you can't save everyone. But you can always save yourself. And sometimes, that's the most powerful thing you can do. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between keeping the peace and standing up for what's right in your family? How did you handle it? What did you learn? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more real stories about navigating family dynamics, standing up for yourself, and finding healing after betrayal. Share this with someone who might need to hear it. You never know whose life you might touch. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. And remember, your worth is not negotiable. Your boundaries are valid, and your peace matters. Take care of yourselves, and may you always have the courage to choose truth over comfort and integrity over easy peace.